when you pick out a hat, like there's a certain amount of memories and feelings imbued in them, your favorite team, workplace, people you were with. So you see it and you get a feeling, and then you put on that feeling. Interviewing is the most transferable skill I have, and it's helped my life more than anything else that I have learned. And I saw people in their 40s getting their first leadership roles, making mistakes that I had made before I was 20. Leadership, it can be difficult, it sure can, but it can also be incredibly rewarding. When you see people blossom, boy, there's nothing that feels better than that.
Craig Colby, welcome to the Tapestry Podcast. So glad that you could join me.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Ina.
This is a fashion podcast where we weave fashion stories one moment, one thread at a time, and discuss the deeper meaning behind the clothing that we choose to wear. You are a seasoned storyteller. It's such an honor to have you join me in conversation. You've written multiple books, you have your own podcast, and as an award-winning executive producer, you have led large teams to deliver on a story. Today, I'm really excited to talk to you about hats, leadership, and the art of being a skillful interviewer. Let's start with hats. I love hats. I know you love hats. You wrote an entire memoir on your baseball hat collection. And when you shared, yes, there it is. When you shared this story with me, it was so heartwarming and so beautiful that I wanted my audience to hear it and develop an appreciation for their hat collection and never look at their hats the same way again. So let's start there. Let's learn about this memoir that you wrote. What inspired you to write an entire book about your baseball hat collection?
Well, I never set out to do that. It happened by accident. In the pandemic, when we were all shut down and my business was shut down, I would sit at this desk and, think of ways to remind people I'm here and still try to get some work. But off to my right here are two hanging racks of baseball hats. And about a weekend, I really hadn't even started resurrecting myself yet, but about a weekend when I'm sitting here, I looked over and thought, well, I have all these hats and I have all this time. I'm going to wear a different hat every day until the lockdown is lifted and we get to be together again. So I took the first hat and took a picture of it and put it on Facebook and told people what I was doing and invited people to join me, not thinking anything would come of it. And later that day, all these hats appeared in the comment section. So the next day I did it again and again and again. And every day during the pandemic, I'd start with a new hat and put it on there. And it was a way to be connected to people when we were isolated. And then I started writing stories about the hats, where I bought them, who I was with, what they reminded me of. And I was not only connected to other people, I was connected to my own past. So it was a real connecting process that happened in a time when we were all shut down. There was an embarrassing part to it, of course. In all great stories, there's a little bit of humility. I didn't know how long we'd be locked down, and I didn't know how many hats I had. So it went on way longer than I expected it to. And the whole thing ended after 125 days. And I thought, not only have I not helped to resurrect my career, now I'm the crazy hat guy, right? I'm just that guy who can't throw away a hat. But a funny thing happened. People started to comment that they were sad that it was over and that they were going to miss it. And not even people who'd contributed or even liked it. My wife's cousin said it replaced the horoscope as the first thing she looked at during the day. So, I knew it was doing some work out there. And my cousin who writes mysteries down in Texas, she said, you should turn it into a book. She said that in one of the comments. And I commented, no one's going to buy this book. I'd buy this book. I'd buy this book. I'd buy this book. I'd buy this book. So it seemed like there was an audience. And my brother, who's an opinions page editor for The Star and has written a nationwide bestseller, he said, I think there's a niche market, but I think there's a market for it. And then my mom, who wrote for the paper in Thunder Bay and started a writers' festival, she asked me to do it. And she had had a book and my brother had had a book, 2 books. And I thought, boy, she really wants this for me. And I guess I want it for myself. So I said, if I can get the clearances to use all the hats, because I've worked in TV so long, I know a little bit about copyright law. So if I can get the clearances, I'll write the book. And then I got New Era Hat Company, 47 brand, who sponsored my webpage, Major League Baseball, the NHL, the NBA, the NFL, the CFL, basically everybody except for Marvel and one small fishing village. And so I wrote it, and I knew it couldn't just be the posts. I knew there had to be a story to it. I knew there had to be real human experiences to it. So then I set about writing the book.
That is such a beautiful story. Were you surprised by how many hats you had? Did you keep on
Yes.
discovering them in various closets? Oh, I have another one and I have another one.
Yep.
Or they already organized and you already knew?
They were pretty organized, but some had been stashed around the place. Like there was by the front door, there's a little hutch where we put toques and gloves and stuff like that. And it was the summer. So I found a couple of hats in there. There were a few surprises that popped up in other places, but for the most part, I know where my hats are. I know where to find them when I want them. But it was certainly a surprise to me. 125 seemed a little excessive. People wondered why my wife put up with me, or them. They probably wondered both. But there was a lesson in that too. She said, "Look, if it makes you happy, then why would I have a problem for it?" Also, they're very stackable and easy to hide.
Right, right. It's amazing how hats can tell a story and reveal a personality. I love hats, and I actually also wrote a book. It just published, and in one of the chapters,
Yes.
I dedicate a whole chapter to hats, and how because I love hats, I equated to like taking out your hat for the season, your signature hat, is like meeting up with a trusted old friend. Like over the years, I've developed a love for hats, and I have a few that I turn to every time the season changes. And there's just this connection and this love that is developed for them. They're part of my story. They've been woven into my own personal story.
Well, a funny thing
And
about hats before you get into the next thing
yeah,
is, when you put them on, you don't see them anymore. It's not like a nice suit or something you can look at, or, a good watch. You put it on and only everybody else sees it. So what are you actually putting on? This is one of the things I learned writing the book
the
is
feeling.
when you
We
pick
talked
that's
about this.
exactly right. When you pick out a hat, like there's a certain amount of memories and feelings imbued in them, your favorite team, workplace, people you were with. So you see it and you get a feeling, and then you put on that feeling.
Did you have a difficulty deciding which hat was going to be represented that very day because you didn't know how long it was going to last? So you're like, oh, maybe another week of isolation, so I really have to pick my favorite. What were the first ones that made it into the cut where you shared them?
Well, the first one, I wish I'd pulled it out. I don't have. I got it in the book. The first one, if I can find it, was a Pittsburgh Pirate 1970s stovepipe hat. They look like prison hats, if I can find it here. And I picked that
Very
one because it was
suitable for the
P for
situation.
pandemic, right? It was P for
Yeah.
pandemic. Maybe I won't find it. So, and then I just pulled out favorites here and there. After a while, though, once it got into it for a good long run, then I thought, okay, yeah, here's the first hat. I thought
Oh
there
yeah.
there has to be some structure to this, right? So, the book is structured in a certain way. The book isn't chronological order of hats or anything like that. But I decided to structure them in, I'm trying to remember, they are work hats, right? Hats from work. Hats you've already seen, but different versions of them. Like I have a lot of Detroit Tiger hats because I'm a big Detroit Tiger fan. So you think you've seen this, but you haven't. Things like that. So
Oh,
there became little themes, and people started to comment on the themes. So
the variations, yeah, because the baseball hat, there's so many different crown shapes and
yeah,
the brim shapes. What's your favorite? What's your personal favorite?
my personal favorite hat. Actually, I have one here because I
Because
thought this was
I meet people and sometimes they'll say, "Oh, I hate hats. Hats look terrible on me." And as a stylist, I think to myself, "You just haven't found the right one with the right crown, with the right brim, the right fabric." Like when you put on the right hat that just feels authentic to you, you feel like $1,000,000. It's that feeling that we were talking about
Yeah,
earlier.
the first hat that I fell in love with was a Detroit Tigers 5950 New Era cap. This isn't it. I got this from somebody who sold these hats back in the 70s and 80s and still had a cache of them. So this is from the 90s, and I know it's from the 90s because it has the Major League Baseball logo on it. Before that, it didn't. It's got a green underbrim, which they went to a different color in the mid 90s. But this hat, before that, all the hats were kind of terrible. They were kind of trucker hats. They didn't have great form, but this is the kind the players wore. And there was a place near Tiger Stadium called Sportsland USA. It was the only place I'd ever seen that you could get them. There was no lids. There was no place that sold hats like this. And I bought one, and it was so beautifully made. It was like structured. It was like nice stitching, molded interior, sweatband. It was like wearing art and architecture. And I loved that hat. I loved it. I wore it basically every day. So my favorite has always been the New Era 5950, but I didn't bring one of these out, but I've got them, of course, handy here. I'll give the Raptors a shout out. I do love the 47 brand cleanup hat, which is unlike the New Era 5950, which has like a full structured crown on it. This is what's known as an unstructured hat. So, you can crunch it up, you can throw it in a bag, right? And it's not going to lose its shape. I like a curved brim rather than a flat brim.
Yeah, same.
And, this has a strap back. There are snapbacks, and this is a full back. This is a hat size. You have to get it in your hat size. So there's a little difference to all of those. So I would say for the structured hat, the New Era 5950, I love a lot. The New Era 3930, which is a stretch fit, I like. They're easier to order online because once I'm a medium large, I know that'll fit me well. Whereas the fitted hats, sometimes there can be little variations. You have to try those on. But the stretch fits used to turn your head into a corkscrew. The stretch fits are a lot better thanks to New Era. So if I'm ordering a structured full back hat online, it's going to be a 3930. If I can buy it in person, it's going to be a 5950. And if I need an unstructured hat, it's going to be a 47 cleanup.
Nice. What's the oldest hat that you have? That's very technical. I'm sure people who understand baseball hats more than me would appreciate all those nuances.
The oldest hat I have is this hat from my high school. And this is a good example of why hats were bad back then. Like, the cardboard in here is very thin. It won't hold a shape. Part of that's because it's old. The logo on the front is just a stitched on patch. It's coming off. The front is like a plastic. The back is plastic and a snapback. Like, this never looked good on anybody's head. But I can't get rid of it because, now we're getting into story time with the hats. I'm an immigrant. I moved to Canada from the United States in 1971 from Michigan, hence the Detroit Tiger fan. And it was in the middle of the Vietnam War. Americans weren't well thought of. That may sound familiar right now. And the kids let us know that we were both different and unwelcome. They threw rocks at our house and yelled, "Yankee, go home." I felt, I felt like I didn't belong there because I didn't. And I took that very personally. And I was very defiant about it. So for a long time, I just didn't care if I belonged. I was an outsider and I was fine with that. I thought, nobody really wants to feel like you don't belong, but you start to wear it like a badge. And, for all the people who don't feel like they belong in high school, I had a very different experience. In grade 10, we were in a study class, and a guy named Dave Hagberg, who I'd known from playing football with, was in the class with me. I was a skinny kid with big glasses and giant hair. I looked awkward. They called me Clark Kent behind my back. And when the glasses came off, they didn't call me Superman, I'll tell you that.
Oh.
So, I was a little awkward, but I was also like unafraid. Dave was good-looking hockey player, cool guy, the perfect 70s feathered hair. He wore sunglasses. I later found out they were prescription sunglasses and like a jean jacket all the time. It's a popular hockey player. All the girls loved him. And we sat next to each other in that class. And, it was a study class. It was a spare class. And our teacher, she didn't want us to make a sound the whole time. Like, tell that to 15-year-old boys, right?
Right.
So we would get a little defiant, and she would always send one of us to the office. So it became a game for Dave and I to have the most creative ways to get kicked out of class. In one class, Dave came in, sat down, and he put one shoe on his desk. And she came in and said, take that shoe off. And he said, no. And she goes, okay, go to the office. The next day she came into class and everybody had one shoe on the desk. And she just didn't say anything. And we turned her desk around so she couldn't put her legs underneath. And then she sat sideways the whole class. Eventually we got kicked out so much that the vice principal told Dave, if you get kicked out one more time, I'm sending you out into the front yard of the school to clean up garbage. And Dave told me that. And I said, that's a great idea. And he said, what? I said, yeah, we're going to be outside. It's nice out. We can talk to everybody. We were in grade 10. The grade 9 girls' gym class was across the street on the track. It was like heaven for a 15-year-old boy. So the next day we showed up and said, we waited like 7 minutes, and then Dave and I raised our hands in unison. We said, can we get kicked? Can you please kick us out? Why? We just think we deserve it. She's going, why do you want to get kicked out? I think she thought she was in trouble. So we had to explain to her the situation. So, it certainly worked to her advantage. So that then the whole class was signing out at the office to go outside, and we cleaned up the yard. The yard never looked better, but we were also outside having fun. And, Dave and I became best friends for life through that. I had found that one friend in life that you're lucky if you have. The person, he didn't see Clark Kent when he saw me. He saw the person I thought I was and wanted to be. And I didn't see some quiet guy or some hockey hero. I saw a really fun, smart guy. And he would have been the guy sitting in the back of the class throughout high school, if not for me. He and I talked about this a lot. And I would have just been kind of the nerdy, funny kid with good marks. But he definitely, as much cool as I have, I think he put that in me. And as much extroversion as he had, I brought that out in him. So for me, this hat is belonging. It's the first time I ever really belonged. So I can't get rid of that hat.
Yeah. I'm imagining if you're cleaning up trash in the afternoon sun, you're probably wearing a baseball hat. Is that the one that you wore?
No, I don't think we had a hat at that time. Those came later when I was vice president of student council. We brought those in. I remember Dave's team was in the hockey championship, and we had all these hats that had been sitting there for a year, and the president and I were throwing them into the stands, and people were going crazy. It was like the first t-shirt cannon. Actually, Sean, the president of student council at the time, I think he got in trouble for it. And they asked him, why are you throwing away stuff we paid for? So people were going crazy, and it was the right thing to do. So no, I wasn't wearing that one, but I certainly wore that a lot. That was my go-to in high school.
Yeah, it's amazing how these precious moments that we share with loved ones, with friends, with family, wearing something just creates a special meaning to that. It's part of the story. The garment, the accessory, the hat is part of that those special memories and those special moments. What inspired you to get into media and into producing and telling stories?
Well, that goes back to my friendship with Dave too.
Oh,
Yeah, because we were theater arts kids. At one point, somebody asked us to do an announcement. I think on this morning announcements, I think for the football team, announce a football game. So at the time on Monday Night Football, Howard Cosell and Frank Gifford were the announcing team. And I said, we should do Howard Cosell and Frank Gifford. And Dave was the very straight Frank Gifford and said everything seriously. And I was Howard Cosell, obnoxious. And so we did that and people loved it. So we kept being asked by all these different organizations within the school to do announcements. And that we didn't finish one time and we just sort of petered out. I said, we have to record these. So they had like a big reel-to-reel tape recorder in theater arts. It weighed like 25 pounds. And I walked, the kilometer and a half from the school to my house carrying that thing pretty much every night. And we would do an announcement 3-4 times a week. We would write the script and do a little play and do a little voices. And we'd put it next to the speaker in the stereo and use the turntable to roll in music. And people loved that. That made us very popular in high school. And I loved the productions. I loved producing something and putting it out there and getting a reaction. And that's when I knew I wanted to get into the media. I thought I wanted to be a reporter. And I was for a very little bit. That didn't work out for me, fortunately. But when I got to TSN, I realized that what I really loved was making things rather than presenting things. So that's how I got into the media. And in university, I took English literature because I knew I wanted to learn how to write, combined with communication studies because I wanted to learn the media.
So media has changed a lot. And
Yeah.
I know you're quite concerned about it as we all are, and you've dedicated an entire episode of a podcast that you co-host with your brother on educating the public on media. What was your first episode about? What was the first thing that you wanted people to learn about media?
Propaganda. The first two, Scott and I did just with ourselves, and they were like little essays where I would structure them, and because I'm the TV producer, and then I would bring out these case studies, and Scott and I talked about how to identify propaganda. How do you know you're getting propaganda? How do you know what's real? How do you identify a news source? The show was called Brothers in Media. If you want to check it out, it's there. It's pretty thorough on what propaganda is, and let's be honest, we are all hit with it all frequently every day. We always think the people we disagree with are getting it, but we're getting it too. Whoever you are, people are trying to sway you, often with misinformation, or appealing to the things you like most to try to make you feel very secure in your opinion, when really you always have to be questioning things. The second one we did was about lying in the media because everyone's concerned about that. Then after that, we brought on guests, and we did one season of 14, and we're about to start planning the second season.
Very cool. So you know a lot about interviewing people from your producing background, pulling teams together, hiring people to either interview or host. Um, what does it take to be a good interviewer based on your experience, based on what you've seen?
What does it take to be a good interviewer? So let me just give you I'm going to give you my creds on interviewing so that people understand, uh, you know, who I am and what I've done. Of course, in communications, I studied journalism, which taught interviewing. When I got into Discovery Channel, they brought in John Sawatsky, who trained people at the CBC and was hired by ESPN to train interviewing. He developed a whole methodology while he was at Carleton University. Um, I had conducted so many interviews throughout my career, and I was very thoughtful. I learned everything I could from them, but there's also things I learned myself. And when I had staff at a startup company, I trained everybody in interviewing. There are people still out there who are using my interviewing things. As a matter of fact, there's one person who runs a very successful company doing corporate videos. And she was brought on a podcast to talk about how you make people comfortable on camera. And she basically recited half of my interviewing seminar. When the World Congress of Science and Factual Producers was shut down during the pandemic, they needed someone to produce keynote interviews because they couldn't meet in person, and they hired me. They could have hired anyone in the world. They hired me, and they hired me back the next year to do all of them. So I know about interviewing. So what does it take to be a good interviewer? First of all, you have to be curious. Curious is always the best place to start. You have to be selfless. So you have to understand that it's about the other person and not you. You have to be strategic in that you have to understand what you're trying to get with an interview and how you want that to flow. And you also have to be generous. And by generous, I mean you have to invite the person you're interviewing into a situation where they feel like talking. And that always starts as soon as you contact them. It doesn't start when the cameras are rolling or the mic's rolling or, you hit play on whatever podcast app you're using. It starts when you meet them for the first time and you start making them feel like they're interesting and what they have to say is worthwhile, whether you have them on or not. That's the process. And for me, when I start training people, I start with communication theory, right from the basics. What is a clear message? And how do you give feedback? All of those things. So I would say those are the hallmarks of a good interviewer.
Okay. And what have you seen in terms of benefits from the people that have studied with you from your own personal life? What is the benefit of being a good interviewer?
I'm going to give you two stories.
I love stories.
Okay. The first one, um, when my kids were younger, I used to, in May, I used to pick them up on Friday, one weekend in May, and I would take them to Detroit for a baseball game. We would see a game Friday night, stay in a hotel, see a game Saturday, stay in the hotel because the kids love the hotel, and come back on Sunday morning, just the boys and me. Now, you may be thinking, why don't you bring your wife? Right? Where's she? How come she's not in the fun? First of all, she doesn't like sitting in a car for 4 hours to sit in a stadium for 4 hours. That's one thing. But the real reason is it was Mother's Day weekend. So we came home on Sunday and, celebrated her and gave her gifts and cards and took her out for dinner and loved her up. But the first present was our absence, right? Tell me a mother that doesn't want some time to herself with young kids, right? So that was me listening to what she wanted and knowing how stressed she was and what the demands were, and knowing that in May she wants to put her garden in and be left alone and go out with friends. So that's how listening helped me in my personal life. I'm going to give you one more. My father died on March 23rd. I was up the weekend before because I thought the end was near sometime this year. And while I was home, he was having chest pains and I took him into the hospital in Thunder Bay. So we're sitting in emergency, waiting for him to be assigned to a room. We're in this curtained off area. It's just the two of us, a lot of noise around, nothing really to do. And I realized this was an opportunity to ask my dad some questions, right? Because who knows if it'd come again. So I said, when were you happiest, Dad? And he said, oh, I was happiest when I was with you boys. And he told me a story about when my older brother was young, sitting and rocking him in a chair. And I came up and said, I want to rock too. And he said he was sitting in that rocking chair, rocking his two boys at the time. And anything to do with being with us boys was when he was happiest. And I said, when were you saddest? He said, when you guys were sick. My younger brother had a time when he was having seizures and they didn't know why.
Oh, that's
My dad
scary.
talked about that and how scared he was. My dad was a fisheries research scientist. I said, who taught you how to fish? He said, oh, my dad taught me how to fish. We'd go back out into the woods and go to this creek, and it was during the 30s, so it was during the Depression. We'd catch fish, and that, supplemented the food we had. And he was an outdoorsman. He hunted. I said, who taught you how to hunt? He said, a World War I sniper taught us how to hunt. He said, it was like my friend's granddad or something like that. He said, we would go in the morning and we would go to my friend's place and his grandmother would give us these 22s and we'd go out into the forest and hunt grouse. I said, how old were you? He said, I was between like 5 and 9 years old.
Oh,
I said,
wow.
what? Are you crazy? He said, no, we were well trained. I said, but kids that age, they don't always make good decisions. He said, well, we were really well trained. And, if asking questions wasn't part of who I am on a day-to-day basis, I might not have thought of that. And, the other thing I asked him was, have you been reflective on your life? He just shook his head and said no. That told me about him too, right? My dad was a thoughtful guy, but he wasn't spending his time looking back. So I find that interviewing is the most transferable skill I have. And it's helped my life more than anything else that I have learned.
There's being an interviewer, there's a skill of listening. So in order to ask the right questions, you have to be deeply listening, and it connects you to the other human being. It opens up this portal where you connect. So when you teach interview theory people how to become better interviewers, is there a style that you kind of help them develop, or is that part of your journey as an interviewer? You just kind of develop it as you go. The more interviews you do, the more you kind of find your way into a style and a message and a slogan, I guess you'd say?
Well, I teach a methodology.
Okay.
Like I teach a process.
Ah,
Um, so, that's a big difference. And the type of interview you do really depends on how you're using the interview. You should be thinking about your podcast as a broadcast. It's got a cast, right? So right off the bat, you have to find a way to interest people. Most people don't. So you need a hook off the top. For every television show I've ever worked on, the first question we really ask is, why should somebody watch this? For your podcast, why should anybody listen to this podcast? And often what I see people do is they take the best clip and they put it at the top, hoping that's enough to bring people in. Uh, I, there's some effectiveness to that. When we did TV shows, we'd often take the best little pieces, put it at the top. I had a boss who called it the Uber reality. And you'd see enough dramatic things. You didn't really get the story, but you understood there would be drama coming up. I prefer that if you were the host, you are the professional one here, right? You should give something intriguing to give people an interest, a reason to listen. Why should anybody listen to me, right? For today's show with me, why would anybody want to hear anything I have to say? Well, this guy wrote an award-winning book that talked about the stories your hats can tell. So if you have a hat collection or even a bunch of hats, you have a bunch of stories in your closet. Oh, that might be interesting. We've got somebody today who's taught interviewing, and he can tell you how being a good interviewer can make you a better professional and a better person. Oh, well, that's interesting, right? Those are the things I'd load up in the front. Like if I was interviewing you, I might say, I'm going to talk to the only person I know who gave birth to a zombie baby, right?
that's what I'm famous for.
That's a
Yes.
good thing to be famous for. I love that Dawn of the Dead movie, and you were so good in it. It was such a memorable scene.
Thank you.
So it's
Who's
just
come
Andy.
back to life to weave healing stories centered
Yes.
around fashion.
But,
I mean, yes.
that would be at least a good hook that could get us into it, right? But you got to give people a reason to get in. And then the interviewing style, not just so much the style of asking questions, but the structure of the interview depends on how you're using it. Like if you're doing a live interview like this, like you want to get into stuff that's intriguing to people right off the bat. But if you've got a good hook, you've got a little room for context, you know? So like you said, how did I come up with this hat thing? What do I know about interviewing? Right? Those are the contexts. Okay, now I understand I should listen to you. And then you got to get into the good stuff. If you were doing an interview where you're just going to be lifting clips out later for a story, you have more time. When I worked on a murder show, I didn't do the interviews for this, but I gave some feedback to the person doing it. Like you had these detectives who would go through the murder. And once I did a few shows, I realized you need to put them in the moment and go step by step. You have to have them relive each step. So you have to really step them through it to pull those clips. Those would be like 3-hour interviews, right? I don't think you'd play those for people. If you've got somebody who's nervous, or even better, someone who's with a corporation that you're interviewing and the HR person's in the corner of the room waiting for them to say the thing that they've been prepped to say. I always ask that question first and got it out of the way. I knew I'd probably never use the answer, but the person I was interviewing got the answer out and they looked in the corner for the HR person and they'd smile and nod. And then I knew, okay, we're done. Everybody's relaxed now, right? Nobody's nervous. Everybody's relaxed. And now I can get them into some easy answers that make them comfortable talking to me. When did you start? I probably wouldn't use that, but I ask them some very easy questions to get them going. And then I get into the meat of the interview. So it really depends on what kind of interview you're doing, the methodology you use.
Hmm. Such an interesting subject. Yeah, being a good interviewer, as you said earlier, it helps you in life, in your personal life, and it helps you professionally. Because, like, when you're a coach, for instance, or even like within the wellness space, you really need to know who you're dealing with, who you're trying to help, and how they might benefit from what you have to offer. So, interviewing, whether it's on the podcast like this or even in life, certainly helps everyone.
Yes, I'll tell you a couple things there that you touched on. The number one reaction I had after I interviewed somebody is, wow, that was great. And that's because most people aren't listened to. Most people, the vast majority, are terrible listeners. And when I do my training for entrepreneurs, I start with some bad listeners that I've noticed. Some of the tech things I've noticed, like the me turn. Somebody's always going to turn it to themselves, right? Or the pause and play. Somebody who will stop when you start talking and they'll wait until you're done. Then they pick it up where they left off, right? There's an egg timer. People who can only stay quiet for so long, then the timer goes off and they have to talk. There's a lot of those out there, right? So to
Wow.
be a good listener has real value, because when you ask people questions, ask people follow-up questions, I don't know if they're so surprised, but they're so happy. There was a study done by Harvard where they looked at people doing speed dating. And the people who asked 2 follow-up questions got the most dates. They
Oh,
were the
wow.
most liked because people paid attention to them and followed up on what they're saying. And there are certain professions, I notice, where you get really good listeners. Social workers,
Mhm.
excellent listeners, right? They're used to asking questions and being empathetic and having people talk to them. They're good listeners. Journalists, of course, good listeners. The producers, generally good listeners. Um, Lawyers can be very good listeners because they have to hone in on the important parts and they have to ask questions to get those. I find often, not always, but often, actors are good listeners because
Mhm.
the good ones have to be present and listening and reacting to what's being said, right? That you can often get actors who are very good listeners.
Yes, a lot of the training that you get, because there's different schools of thought, like there's Stanislavski, and they all stress the listening. Yeah, I can't say that I was a good listener when I was a kid. Uh, the immigration process, because I'm an immigrant as well, was very stressful, and I felt like my nervous system was shot by the time I left high school. And so when your nervous system is on edge, it's really hard to listen. So my personal journey was I had to get into meditation and yoga and calm the nervous system, and that made me a better actor and a better listener. So we're not born great listeners. Maybe some people are, and the common thing is my kids are not listening. Why don't they listen? And so it's part of becoming a more developed human being in developing those listening skills. So from your experience, what does that look like? Like, can you actually teach listening, or is that a personal journey?
You can absolutely teach listening, and it's better to curious people. I will say one thing though, your kids are listening to you. They may not be listening to what you want them to listen to, but they are listening to what you say and what you do.
Mm,
And it
yeah,
will come back to you in the
yeah.
worst places at the worst times, right? And they are picking up things that you don't even know. They can show you things about yourself you didn't know and maybe didn't like. They may not show you they're listening. They may even want to show you that they're actively not listening, but they are. Young people aren't necessarily good listeners, right? They're selfish, and evolutionarily they need to be, because that's how they survived. And so I saw somebody talking about teenage boys, and they said, when you look at the teenage mammals, often many of them will move away from their pack and put themselves at great danger just so they don't have to listen to their parents. They'll put their lives at risk. Um, and that's part of it. Of course you can learn to be a good listener. Drama in school, I think, helped me a lot. I think people telling me certain things and letting me know I hadn't listened or wasn't considerate of other people made me pay more attention to that. Interviewing training, for sure. I think by doing so many interviews and liking it, right? Really liking hearing people talk and understanding who they are and what they do. Um, I think just enjoying that process naturally made me a better listener. There was a I was at a conference in France, and somebody had organized a bus ride out to a winery, a little, you know, 45 minutes outside of the city we were in, La Rochelle. And I was talking to this young woman who ran a film festival in England. And about 30 minutes into the bus ride, she goes, "You know everything about me, and I don't know anything about you. How did that happen?" And I was just interested, so I asked questions. And, that's a bit of a mistake there. Like if you really want to get close to somebody, you can't just draw from them. You have to share something. Sort of the first process I have in interviewing somebody before you get to the interview is you try to find a common bond. So when I did a lot of work with NASA when I was at Discovery Channel. So there'd be a lot of people in Houston. My wife and I had season tickets to the opera, and I knew Houston had a good opera company. So because I worked in sports, sports is a good place to start. But for the people in Houston, I'd often throw opera out there. Said, "Oh, you have a good opera company down there." And there was one person who said, "Yeah, my wife and I go all the time." So we talked for 20 minutes about opera. And so I shared something of myself that we had in common, and that created a little bond. Now he wants to talk to me. Right? Now, because I've shared something of myself and we have something in common, he is more warmed up to the idea of talking to me. He knows me a little bit. So there's a little sharing that comes first. But yeah, you can definitely teach people to be better listeners. The first thing they have to realize is how to listen. What kind of listener are you? I'm a bit of an egg timer. It's something I've had to overcome. Sometimes I can feel the egg timer go off and I have to go, okay, it's okay. Just keep listening. What they're saying is good. You can get to that later if you want. So
Yeah.
you can definitely be trained to be a good listener. Absolutely.
Part of listening is also speaking. Do you think, and part of speaking is leading, because when you're speaking, you're sharing a message and you're leading. And that's the other thing that I wanted to touch upon in the
Yes.
conversation, leadership, because I know that you're well versed in that, having led so many teams and productions. What comes first, do you think? Do you become an efficient presenter speaker first? Or does it happen simultaneously? Probably simultaneously, right?
Well, I'm not even sure they're the same thing. I mean, there are two parts of communication, right?
Right.
Perfect communication, this is where I start the interview training, is I tell you something. And if you can repeat it back to me so that you have completely understood what I've said, that is perfect communication, right? So it means that I have said something and you have heard it and understood what I've said. And the thing that gets in the way of perfect communication is called noise. And it can be physical noise like airplanes or cars, but it can also be if you're having a bad day and you're thinking about the kids, I couldn't get them out. You're not listening to me so well, right? Or if I'm, looking at my phone while I'm talking, I'm not sending it so well. Those sorts of things. Noise can be if we're having we're having a discussion with somebody we disagree on politics with, which happens a lot now. And somebody's saying something that is coming from a place that I fundamentally disagree with. Like already there's noise of the personal bias in there. And if you listen properly, you may realize, oh, I actually have something in there in common with that person that we can build a common bridge on if I was listening enough. And sometimes it's enough to say, I understand what you're saying, even if I don't agree with it. But it's a lot of interviewing and speaking is about eliminating noise. So
Mm.
when you're interviewing somebody, probably the biggest noise, especially if it's on camera, is insecurity, right? I'm going to say something wrong. They're not going to like what I'm saying. So the way you get rid of that noise is, you look them in the eye, you smile and you nod, and you give them reinforcement. When they say something really great, you lean forward and you let them know, yeah, I hear this is really good. I really am enjoying what you're saying. And that gets them to get rid of a filter, right? The insecurity filter. And then they start talking naturally. A lot of what I talk about with people interviewing professionally is getting rid of filters. There are a lot of people out there who will tell people how to answer a question. Now that person is thinking, oh, I've got to say it this way. They're not talking naturally. That's a filter. The best interviews, the ones that pop on camera, are people speaking passionately about something that they know. And the more filters you drop in the way, the harder it is to do that. When you're doing a show where you need people to talk in complete sentences, when what they say is the whole thing, you're not writing any narration, then you have to say, people will say, answer this with the question in it, which means, make it a full sentence. What's your favorite color? Red. No, answer the question. Oh, my favorite color is red. So you have to introduce that a little bit. It's a necessity.
Mm.
But the more filters you throw in there, the harder it is for someone to get into that natural flow state where they are speaking from their heart about things that matter to them.
That makes total sense. Yeah, insecurities could be part of emotions because, like you were saying, if they're talking about a subject that they're both divided on, there's emotions that come up. That's the filters. Now, in terms of speaking, something said to you, and you need to be, if you're a good listener, you're able to take what was said and say it back in your own way. But part of the job on the speaker's side is to say it in an efficient, eloquent way.
Yes.
So in that way, it's a give and take. It's an ebb and flow. Now let's talk leadership.
Yes. By the way, writing has a methodology, and I teach that too. So does my brother. So I can
Nice.
teach you a
Okay.
methodology for writing. Okay, go ahead. Leadership.
Yes. Leadership. So part of being a skillful speaker and a skillful listener is leadership. How did you get into leadership? What was your first job and what was the biggest lesson you learned?
My first leadership experience happened in public school when I was
Right.
selected to be, the class representative. And it surprised me, right? Because I thought I was the outsider. So, and that was the first time somebody said, oh, we want you to represent us. And, I made mistakes then, made mistakes that were about me instead of what was about them. And I learned from those. In high school, I was captain of the football team. I was captain of the soccer team. I was vice president of student council. I won the Rotary Citizenship Award. I went to athletic leadership camp after grade 11. Actually, both my brothers went to athletic leadership camp too. My dad said that's what he was most proud of, that all three of us went. I was valedictorian. In university, I was a resident assistant. I was in charge of a floor. So I was both a neighbor, but I was also in charge of people in a social situation, which can be very difficult. At work, I've been a producer and an executive producer and a senior producer and a director of production. All of those are leadership roles. In my personal life, I've been a coach, a convener, and I'm now in charge of House League at East York Baseball. All of these are leadership roles. All of them are leadership roles. And, my dad was in the military, so he would talk about leadership and he led units. So all of those, most of those came with a certain amount of training, especially young. And I saw people in their 40s getting their first leadership roles, making mistakes that I had made before I was 20.
Oh, wow.
And I think for me, leadership doesn't start where people think it does. People think leadership starts with speaking and being in front of the room and commanding attention.
That's
And
what I thought. That's what I just said. So.
Yeah, inspiring people with your words and, bending people to your will. That's not it. Leadership starts with listening. Because what are you trying to do as a leader, right? Especially a leader at work. What do you need from people? You need them to do their best work, right? You need the best performances out of them, right? So it's about them doing their stuff. So I know from my business administration class, I took a business degree after my first degree, and from management training that I've had, that, I know what motivates people at work. And it's not money. If you don't have enough money, you're demotivated. Once you make enough and you're comfortable and all your needs are taken care of and you got a little extra, money's nice, but it's not the motivator anymore. People are motivated by three things. One is being heard. They want to be heard when you talk to them. Second is they want to be recognized when they've done something good. And the third is they want growth. They want to be able to grow. So let's think about those things. They want to be heard. Well, that's interviewing. That's listening, right? That's when they say something. They not only want to know that you've heard them, and that sometimes that's enough. You need to show them that you've heard them. I'm going to tell you a really quick little story. It's a baseball story. My favorite baseball manager is the Detroit Tigers' Sparky Henderson. He led him to a World Series in '84. He had a very volatile player named Kirk Gibson. Big, emotional, loud, brash guy. Kirk Gibson told the story when he later became a manager. And he said he was mad about something in the clubhouse, stomping around, making a big scene, just venting his anger. And the manager's door flew open and Sparky said, "Big boy, get in here." Kirk Gibson stomps into the room and Sparky Anderson, "Tell me what's going on." And he ranted and raved and talked about everything that was bothering him. And Sparky Anderson said, "Is that it?" And he goes, yeah. He said, "Okay, get out of here." And Kirk Gibson said he left and he felt better. All he needed was someone to listen to him. He didn't even change anything, but he just listened to him and made sure he heard everything. Have I heard everything? Right? Have you said everything you need to say? Yes, I have. All right, we're done. So, listening is number one. I always told, there's two things. I always told the people who work for me, I can't fix it if you don't tell me about it. If you can tell me about it, I can fix it. And I've also got a policy that people are going to complain, right? No matter what, it's human nature. They're going to complain. If they're not complaining to you, they're complaining about you. So you'd better get them talking to you about their problems.
Ah, wise.
Yes. So the second one is recognizing people when they've done something good. This is broader listening, but you have to listen to what they're doing and what they're saying and what they've done. You have to listen with your eyes to see what they're doing. So you have to pay attention and receive all of those things in order to say, yeah, that was really good. And this person needs to be recognized. That's an output thing. But again, it's not commanding the room and telling everybody what to do. And then it's growth, giving people a chance to grow. You can give them extra tasks, but if it's something that they don't feel is advancing them or making them better at what they do, it's just extra work. So you have to find out what they want, and then you have to give them the opportunities to go there. All three of those things that motivate people come from listening. The other big thing is, if you want people to listen to you, they are much more receptive to what you're saying if you've listened to them first. If I have a conflict with someone, I always say, tell me everything you got to say. I want to hear everything. And I don't jump in the middle to contradict things. Tell me more. Tell me more. Is that it? Is there more? I ask some questions on that. When they're done, completely done, then I talk.
Nice.
And when there's a conflict with somebody, and I do this at baseball, I've done this at work, and you have to call somebody in, you say, I've heard about the situation. What's your side? What do I need to know? Rather than saying, you did this and we've got to get on this and you did, I listen to them first. Make sure I have all the information, because even though I have one side and it may sound really bad, still only one side, right? And then people are more able to talk to you. So leadership is really, it starts with listening. And once people know you've heard them, that you've recognized them, that you're giving them the chance to grow, you're doing what you can there, then people are going to run through a wall smiling for you.
Oh,
right? Because they know that you've got their back. But if you're just out there telling everybody, here's what it's going to be, without listening to them. I worked at one place where one of the big leaders would get up and make a speech, and after every time he made a speech, somebody quit because he laid out these expectations without understanding the implications of them. And it just meant that work was going to be harder for everybody.
Right. Wow. Those are really valuable skills. I love how intricately we went into the conversation of leadership. Now, you teach these,
I do.
right? Can you tell me about your program? Like, how do you work with people? How big are the groups? How long does it take to do the training?
The seminar lasts about an hour to 90 minutes. But then if we really want to break off into groups and put it into practice and see how it does, we're looking at 2 hours. And I can do this anywhere from individual training to bigger groups. I've offered this through the Staple Spotlight program. I've done this for entrepreneurs. I've done this for professionals. Every place I've worked, I've offered this as well. So here's where it's really helpful. If you have an office where people quit a lot, I can cut that down.
Nice.
if you follow what I do. If you have an office where you think you're not very productive, I can help with that too. Those are great things. If you feel like you're having difficulty in your professional relationships, the boss, whatever, I can help you with that. But also in your personal relationships, if you're having strained relationships with people you love, all of these things can be applied to that. If you are new to a leadership position, I can definitely help you with that.
Yeah, that is a really valuable skill. Leadership is not easy. It's
Nope,
um it's not easy because you're dealing with other human beings. There's so many variables, there's so much unknown, and like you said, you always have to come back to the listening and being in the moment, which is hard to do.
it is.
There's noise, like you said, that gets in the way.
And it's
So
happened to me. My own noise has gotten in the way of me listening when I should have. I lost an employee by that once when I had so much going on personally that I didn't listen properly. And uh, we had one confrontation. I could say I was justified, but I have often regretted doing things that I was justified in doing, but I've never regretted being kind or listening. So it is hard to know in those instances, but you can always go back, right? You can always go back afterwards and say, "Hey, listen, I'm sorry we had that moment. I want to hear what you have to say," right? And if you can do that, I think most people are forgiving and will give you some grace, especially if you show the effort that you want to listen and understand.
right. Well, thank you so much for sharing your tapestry. I always love to say life is a series of moments woven together to create our rich tapestry. And you have so much going on. I really enjoyed reading your book, by the way. Thank you
Well,
for
thank you so much.
spending and sharing. I love the stories that you shared of how your experience of coaching your sons. And that was a beautiful example of leadership, quiet leadership. Because you said earlier, people think leadership is this loud, performance, but I love the way you led the boys to become better and better players just by observing and letting them lead, and you allowed them to be leaders. And that, I think that's the best quality about being an efficient leader, is that you allow others to lead. You don't dominate, you allow others to grow as leaders.
Yeah, you pick your spots. I mean, in that story, there was a spot where I had to give them some bad news, but I said it quietly and then walked away and gave them the space to absorb it. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
leadership, it can be difficult. It sure can, but it can also be incredibly rewarding. When you see people blossom, boy, there's nothing that feels better than that.
Right. Yeah. And the world needs better leaders because, I mean,
Yep.
how else are we going to make change? And I know we met through an entrepreneurship networking event, and that is such a beautiful space to become a better leader. As an entrepreneur, you're leading your business, you're leading others, you're leading your clients. So it's definitely a skill that every entrepreneur can benefit from.
And a great place to become a better listener.
Yes, true, true. Yes. Well, thank you again for weaving this rich tapestry today. Is there anything else that you want to add before we part ways? Anything that the audience would benefit from knowing that I missed asking you?
No, I'm not going to throw that in there, but one thing I will throw in is something that you did extremely well as a podcast producer and a host and interviewer, is you did a pre-interview with me,
I did. I
right?
always do one. I have to, because everybody's story is so rich. What do I hone in on? What
Yeah.
do I focus on? So, yes, thank you for recognizing that. I always do.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
very smart thing to do, and not everyone does it. It's extra work, but I think it really pays off in the program. So I'm a big fan. I love what you're bringing to your podcast and to the world. Your book looks gorgeous. I can't wait to read it. And thank you very much for introducing me to your audience.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Me too.
This episode was brought to you by Jewel Branding Studios, a global provider of style consulting services. At Jewel, we believe crafting a signature look is like crafting a signature scent. It makes you memorable and recognizable. Whether you want to elevate your style for work or for personal reasons, we offer life-changing, long-lasting style transformations grounded in practical advice that leads you on a journey of self-discovery, self-expression, and self-love. Follow me on Substack at Inna Korobkina to gain access to my newsletters and get the latest updates on my speaking appearances and fashion education workshops.